a scion of many worlds. So, if you and the other titans are not gods, then how have you grown so large? The technique is adapted from a race known as the Apuk. They're somewhat like the Yorgwa in that they change shape, but their changes are slower and lasting. Emmanuel explains. Silkstorm had caught a glimpse of other members of the Titan squad and had more questions. What are the Apuk like? She asks. Physically, they are a two-armed, two-legged race, much like the Arumenta, but no obvious elemental traits. At first, they have a pair of small horns emerging from their head and a small reptilian tail that wouldn't look out of place on a Jorgwa. So, what elemental trait do they have? Fire. They are very, very fire-aligned. It's an entire aspect of their culture and way of life. They also have a very strange culture where humility is an expression of greatness. What? The Apuk believe that certain traits speak for themselves. If you are wealthy, then you should have a reputation for wealth, and therefore spending grand amounts of money to show off is just a waste of both time and the wealth. As such, the wealthiest of their kind generally have the simplest clothing. It also applies to martial strength. The most powerful warriors they have look like they would be the weakest. But it's actually considered a form of suicide to challenge an Apuk battle princess without a fairly hefty numbers advantage. Oh, so they use this technique to grow smaller and larger when they are not certain of their battle prowess. A larger frame does have powerful advantages in battle. Reach and mass are not to be ignored. Setting aside the sheer usefulness of Axiom and what a weapon can do, you need an enormous amount of skill to overcome a larger opponent. Emmanuel explains. So does that mean the Titans are basically the most powerful soldiers you can make? Sort of. You can't discount more unique individuals. There are two, although I've heard of a third Axiom adepts that I don't want to fight. Then there's also myself and my now nearly indestructible self. What can they do? And one can destroy anything around him to create more Axiom for him to use, or create so much it induces a null collapse which makes Axiom unusable, something he can ignore in a fight and still be deadly. The other one is so precise you can only barely sense his most extravagant Axiom uses. I've heard of a third. Apparently he does something with tritite coins that turns the area around him into a place of sheer madness that only he can control. Tritite? Wait, that's the blue metal. The one that resists all Axiom, she says, and he nods before reaching down and revealing a blade strapped to the side of his ankle under his pants. To her, it's the size of a sword, but it's just a knife in his hands. Standard issue to have a tritite tungsten alloy blade. The alloy keeps the strength of tungsten and the resistance of tritite. Our best anti-Axiom weapons and armor use this combination. Tungsten? Think of it like extra heavy and strong iron that can be forged into powerful weapons and sturdy armor. It's rarer though, and harder to work with. If you want a more comprehensive explanation, well then we have to go into molecular structure and atomic layout, both of which require a bit more education for you to understand. Those words sounded proper, but I've never heard them. Molecules are the smallest amount of things that are mixers of other things. Atoms are the purest state, but both are so small they cannot be seen with the naked eye. You need powerful tools to make them out. But what are they? Atoms are energy and empty space in the right combinations. Molecules are atoms stuck together in the right patterns to make other things. Water is 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen atom combined, for example. Does this make sense so far? It does, but wait. The elder once told me that all things we eat are eventually part of us and we drink water. So does that mean that I have a lot of this hydrogen and oxygen as part of me? Through the water, yes. Oxygen and hydrogen are also in the air we breathe, although much more oxygen. Oxygen is roughly 1 part in 5 of every breath you take, where the amount of hydrogen is so small that one could be forgiven for dismissing it outright. but it's still there. That's right, as part of the water in the air, like when things start feeling greasy. No, there's a reason we consider things differently when they're atoms and molecules. Water is a nearly perfect example. Oxygen and hydrogen are gases. They float the air as part of air, but water is a liquid. It falls in pools. They're very different things, even though water is made of hydrogen and oxygen, he says, and she hangs on to his every word as he leads her through the hallways. Now, here we are. Professor, I have a new student for you. I caught her taking control of naturally forming storms in the bright northern sea and learning as she went. She needs all the basics at the very least. Really? We're just about to end this class now, though, and right now she needs a primer, a communicator, and a schedule. That's 15 minutes tops for you. I need to get back to Bright Dawn. They're probably half feral at needing to wait as long as they already have at this point, he says. You were blowing off a political meeting to bring me a student? Your mother was right. Dedicated scholar, the teacher says in an impressed tone. He also took the time to teach me a bit, Silkstorm states. Yes, but now I have to go before the consequences of that get any worse. Best of luck, Emmanuel states before leaving, and the now abandoned Silk feels suddenly very self-conscious. Well, don't hang about in the hallway, young lady. Come on in, the teacher states. Now what's your name? My proper name is Smooth as Silk, but you can't pronounce or even hear that properly, so I go by Silkstorm as well, she says, giving out the chime for Smooth as Silk in Trill speech. I think you said something about silk in that bit of Trill spec. Oh, you understand it. Silk is pleasantly surprised. I've heard other students speak in it. I can't make the sounds, but I'm starting to get an ear for it. Anyways, we've gotten sidetracked. I am Nurse Cornflower. My species is Kobe. I have very recently gained a teaching license that I will be using to instruct as many people as possible in between my studies of the moltings your own kind have given off. This has been a fascinating study on the possible rejuvenating effects that such a molting has caused. Such a chance for study may very well never come again, so I've been religiously documenting the results. Does that mean you want my old molting? I have plenty, and the Urthani who molted them off have signed up to be non-invasively studied. You're here as a student, not a subject, Nurse Cornflower explains. Now if you could take a seat to the side, please. I'll be finishing my lesson soon and I can get you started on a primer. Just one question. Why did he call you professor if your title is nurse? Silkstorm asks. It's a quirk from his mother. If you're teaching, she refers to you as a professor. It's a way she and her son are polite to others. I still need my doctorate to really be a proper professor, though. This, however, is much easier and a well-understood curriculum. So I merely need the teaching license. Anything else? Nurse Cornflower asks. No, that will be all for now, Silkstorm says as she finds her way to a seat and then has to shuffle a bit to get comfy. Do you think we wait at your pleasure? Do you think that we're yours to call at your convenience? Gertie demands of him as he returns. Honestly, I expected to have to track each of you three down individually and speak to you in your own offices. I didn't think you would stay in the chamber, Emmanuel states with a dismissive shrug. The storm has been taken care of. I, however, did find something interesting in the woman who was whipping it up stronger and stronger. So we were nearly attacked? Boyle Coyle demands. Not at all. She was experimenting and learning, not really considering the possible side effects of what happens after. Still, she is an eager and ready student, so now she will be getting proper instruction that won't possibly cause enormous harm to others, Emmanuel states. Now, that does bring up a very interesting topic. Such as, Helen asks, now that things have settled here, I feel secure enough to offer up a portal. Essentially, I am connecting Lacrin by opening up special doorways that lead to and from the Aridus Valley. If you allow me to erect one here in Bright Dawn, then your peoples can easily make their way to the halls of learning there. It would also allow further trade and travel beyond. Granted, the doorway will be small, but with expanded bags or cases, you can carry a huge amount of cargo through. Can they be closed? She presses and he shrugs. I've seen no reason to make one so capable yet, but it is easily possible. It will just take a little more time and effort to make it that way. Then I accept, Helen states. Well, I think this is... Boyle Coil begins. Boyle Coil, I'm calling in my marker, the big one. What? Why? What are you seeing that I'm not? Boyle Coil asks. I'm calling in the marker. Give me a good enough reason and you won't need to. This is important stuff, Boyle Coil says. Yes, it is. Excuse me a minute. She says first to Boyle Coil and then to Emmanuel. He takes a step back away from them all, and all three women huddle together for a quick planning session. It takes them a few minutes and there are some raised voices before huddling back together. Then they break apart. We're in. What would be the best places to put the portal? Bright Dawn has a lot of ports, Gertie says, and Emmanuel smiles. We can use the system I've been setting up for Miru. The Gold Lands and the independent cities are also using it. You have one central location that connects to Aridus, but it also connects to other places as well. This will make all of Brightstone more connected to itself and the rest of the world as well. But where do we put it? That's what I leave up to you. Some places can never decide. The Breakaway Empire and Greenstone are caught up in endless debates about it. Really? The independent cities aren't? The city of Coalstoke's representative called in a huge number of favors her family had been gathering for generations to make Coalstoke the central point. If she hadn't, I expect that there would have been assassins involved by now. Yeah, that's generally how those girls work. All right, you've got a yes, so get started on making those portals. We should know where we want them all by the time you're done, Gertie says. Of course. Now, is there anything else of worth? Considering that you've got bigger and better flying ships going around the world, getting angry and uppity about them won't do much. Just as pointless getting blood from an ocean of it as it is squeezing it out of a stone, Boyle Coil states. Right. Well, you do know that one of the classes available will be on how those ships fly, right? Granted, a basic education will be needed to understand everything, but it will be available. Why scavenge for something ancient that was sitting in a cave for generations when you can make one for yourself? Emmanuel asks. Oh, I don't know. The massive amount of metal and weird exotic materials needed to actually make one? Sure, a flying ship is interesting, but it's still tons and tons and tons of high-grade valuable metal. Of course, not that you care. You have those city-sized monsters flying above us. So to you, it'd be like a gold shaving when you've already got your bed propped up on bullion bars. So you're saying you have more interest in metals and mining techniques? Emmanuel asks, and she nods. And what makes you think that lessons on things like that won't be offered? Offering something of equal or greater value doesn't mean you didn't steal something to begin with. She counters, and he nods. True enough. What do you want done about it? There's nothing you can do. Even if you bring it back, you still stole it to begin with. Boyle Coil states. Big talk from a pirate. Oh, so pirates don't have property rights? Not what I said. I was more poking at the hypocrisy. Oh, I know it. That's why I'm not more upset. I have a temper, but I'm not an idiot. When I cool, the rage hardens into a blade to cut through my issues. This is going to end very well for Bright Dawn. But that doesn't mean that my scales aren't scuffed, but I can take a scale scuffing for a big payday, Boyle Coil states. I'm glad to hear it. Anything else you want to know? Emmanuel asks. How were things decided with the portals and the mountain clans? Gertie asks. They had a big tournament for which village would have the central portal. After that, it was a big party. And then they all moved their tent villages around the central area and went out hunting through the portals in order to give the beasts thereafter a false sense of security. In their words. Ha, that's Mountain Clan for you. Yes, it is, Emmanuel states.